Do any of you actually care about cultural appropriation? I've definitely never seen anyone say that one shouldn't eat Mexican food if one is not Mexican. There isn't some ironclad, formal rule that people have to learn. Just be respectful. Learning about a Native American culture and preparing traditional meals is respectful. Dressing up as an Indian and making shrieking noises is disrespectful. There's a gray area somewhere. Some people may disagree on what is and is not respectful, but all you can do is try your best to be respectful and open-minded. As with many things, the lack of subtlety or nuance in attempting to understand what I think you see as your ideological opponent's position is causing issue here. If it's willful ignorance, the rest of my post here isn't worth reading. If it's genuine ignorance, then see if you can take anything from the remainder of my words. The argument against appropriation is not, if you're not Mexican, you cannot eat tacos or burritos. That is a facsimile deliberately constructed in order to make the academic and more rigorous argument look ridiculous and silly. To help those that don't want to engage with the argument avoid it and file it away in a box that is labeled, not worth opening. The argument against cultural appropriation is more of the form. People born in and happy to continue the dominant culture in a given space should not utilize surface-level and sanitized approximations of a culture, particularly those cultures which empirically struggle under the aforementioned dominant one. So, let's use an example. A white person in the USA eats traditionally Caribbean food, becomes a fan, and claims loudly to their peers that they love Caribbean food and culture. This is of course not a problem whatsoever. Further, you'll find culinary culture is one of the easiest to share genuinely and sincerely in a productive way for both parties. People love eating. A white person in the USA decides to adopt Caribbean cultural signifiers, predominantly aesthetic, like clothing, and borderline mocking, borrowing vocabulary words they'd never use otherwise, typing in pidgin online, etc. Absurd and mostly destructive, often done on a lark and just as likely to be dropped within a month as it is to lead to genuine exploration and appreciation. I've read a few of your other posts in this thread and, if you happen to read this one, I expect a somewhat combative response that leans heavily on what you perceive to be an unfair judge in these cases. Something like, oh, just because Twitter says it's appropriation means it's racist? Again, this is of course nonsense. Let's be sincere. Bluntly, it's almost obvious where the line is. Most of the time a bunch of white Virginias wearing poor approximations of Native American headdresses is pretty clearly destructive and infuriating. A bunch of white Virginians discovering the magic of ceviche and making it their favorite dish as they visit the restaurant often and chat with the owner is pretty clearly a good thing. I am going to guess, though I could be wrong here, that you are a white American. For what it is worth, you are going to be more naturally inclined to feel that it is exaggerated. There is cognitive dissonance afoot, and also a risk to engaging the core of the argument. It is scary to dive into something that might end up concluding, hey, you've done something pretty annoying for a long period of time. But you shouldn't be scared of that. There's no risk. It's okay to learn and change behaviors if indeed you were acting poorly. And if you weren't, great. No worries then. But coming into a discussion so dismissive from the get seems like a backward way of growing as a human, at least to me. I think I can speak for all of Balkans when I say that we love to share our cultures and participate in others. It's all appreciation unless you're mocking it. Cultural appropriation is a neutral term. On its own, it is neither good or bad. This is what people don't get. They just think the term in itself is inherently critical. It's not. People take things from other cultures all the time. Most of the times this is harmless. But there are instances where people object. Namely, historically colonized, oppressed cultures tend to get irritated when the people who oppressed them exploit their culture for profit, especially if they do it thoughtlessly. I'm Irish. Feel free to go wild with anything. Even the name Paddy Wagon doesn't insult us. We even have a bus company with the same name. It only applies to things sacred or held in high regard by the culture. Like, I'd be offended you wore a yarmulke as a goof or a fashion statement or something. But enjoy all the bagels you want. You get me? There's appropriation and then there's appreciation. One mocks while the other shares. I'm Jewish and I think it's kinda creepy and weird when e.g. Christians do a Christian Passover Seder. That uses tropes from the Seder but makes it about Jesus. Like it feels bad for this ritual that Christians killed Jews for doing to now be just another thing they use to talk about Jesus. I don't think it's a very important problem. And obviously they are free to do it anyway. But I don't like it. The actual definition of CAA has gotten watered down by social media. But from what I learned in university-level courses on race, gender and sociology, cultural appropriation is at its worst or most damaging when members of a dominant group, in America, it's white peoples, take elements of the appearance or cultural adornments of groups historically and currently systemically oppressed, and make fun of, with those same adornments. I.e., don't celebrate Black History Month by dressing up in afro wigs and painting your face black and eating watermelon. More nuanced example, being a white person with locks in a corporate environment, while your black coworker with locks gets told to cut his by HRBC clients think he's scary. Do you have to cut your hair? No. But some acknowledgement of this privilege and support to your black coworker mitigates the cultural miscommunication. TLDR. Don't put on someone else's stuff to poke fun. If you are actually wanting to celebrate them in a positive way, just ask what's the proper way to do so. When done with admiration rather than mockery, it is acceptable. Both sharing and mockery occur. If I were visiting Japan as a tourist and had to wear a kimono to enter a shrine, I wouldn't do it to mock the Japanese. I'm not sure whether it's the same in other countries. But in Indonesia they wanted us to wear their clothing as a symbol of respect. I'm annoyed by it when it's used as a form of marketing or as a consumer product. The tackiness comes in when you're trying to make money by appropriating a culture and not just enjoying it for yourself. This goes for social media as well, since the goal is to get more followers, which then can lead to monetizing your online self. It's an effect of capitalism where the only culture that exists is pop culture and consumer culture. I oppose cultural appropriation but dress in a kimono if not Japanese. Tattoo Chinese symbols if not Chinese. Eat Mexican if not Mexican. Dance samba if not Brazilian. I wouldn't say any of these qualifies as cultural appropriation to me. Just doing something another culture does is not inherently appropriation. You are not robbing a culture of anything nor disrespecting it by engaging with it. If you dance a Brazilian dance as a non-Brazilian, you're not appropriating that culture. You are engaging with it, which is not disrespectful. You are not taking anything out of its cultural context. I care. But don't think those are examples of cultural appropriation. Westerners monetizing yoga irritates me, as does people criticizing me for pronouncing my native language words correctly versus the Western way. No. Imagine. A lot of people celebrate Christmas and Gregorian calendar New Year. I celebrate them without even asking that question to myself, being East Asian. There is a huge difference between cultural appropriation and appreciation. As I understand it, with the exception of use of things that are sacred, precious, highly symbolic. Example: Bindi. It is okay to respectfully appreciate and enjoy elements of another culture. It is always a good idea to learn about that thing though. Where it is from, what it is for, and what it means to the culture who created it. Also using that thing to build connections with people from that culture instead of alienating them. It's okay to enjoy something, but awareness and acknowledgement is just respectful. Also, in my experience, it adds significance to something and gives insight into why it matters at all, instead of just making it throwaway. I have heard that it is usually angry woke white people who attack others for this, as they don't understand this distinction. Cold sweat smile. Yes, we are real. As an indigenous person, I care about it a lot. Dressing up as a Mexican or something to perpetuate harmful stereotypes is kind of a dick thing to do, imho. Wait, eat Mexican food if not Mexican? Do people really get upset about this? If so, there are a lot of Mexican restaurants in my area that are going to be very disappointed. I'd say it also depends on whether you're appreciating a superficial visual aesthetic from a culture versus respecting the meaning and context.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicuricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.